Alina Ward had always known that being a diplomat for humanity was not easy, but she had never expected today to be this strange. She stood in the main chamber of the Crack's Dominion flagship, a massive ship that gleamed like liquid metal under the artificial lights. The walls shimmered, reflecting 100 tiny shapes that moved in ways humans could not predict. Across the room stood Valor Threx, the Crack's warlord, a creature so tall that Alina had to tilt her head back almost painfully to see his face. His skin was a deep obsidian, and it rippled subtly, almost like living armor. His eyes were bright amber, intelligent and cold, yet there was something curious in them as he regarded her. Alina tried to remember the protocol. She had spent months preparing for this meeting, reviewing every known piece of Crack's culture and their codes of honor. She knew that any misstep could be disastrous. And yet, when the tension became unbearable, she did what humans sometimes did in stressful situations. She joked. "Relax," she said, trying to force a casual tone. "You'd make a cute wife with that posture." The chamber went silent. Alina froze mid-step, suddenly aware that she might have just committed a cultural crime of monumental proportions. Valor Threx tilted his head slightly. Then, slowly, he smiled. It wasn't a human smile. It didn't reach his eyes fully, but it was unmistakable. And then, with a movement so smooth it was almost elegant, he pressed a control on the wall. The doors to the chamber closed with a soft hiss. Alina's heart skipped. She looked at the warlord. "Wait, what?" Valor Threx's voice was deep and resonant, echoing slightly in the metallic chamber. "Do not be afraid, human," he said. "You are interesting." Alina swallowed. Her training told her to stay calm. Interesting? That wasn't exactly comforting. "What does that mean?" she asked cautiously. "It means," Valor Threx said, pacing slowly around her, "that in your culture humor is dangerous. Boldness is dangerous. You are dangerous, and dangerous humans are rare." Alina's eyebrows shot up. "Dangerous me? I'm just a diplomat. I negotiate, I talk." Valor Threx stopped in front of her. "Exactly. You talk without fear. You joke with a warlord. That is remarkable." Alina tried to think fast. She remembered her briefing notes. Cracks valued respect and formal behavior above all else. Humor could be misinterpreted as weakness, or worse, a direct challenge. She realized with a sinking feeling that she might have just done both. "So, am I in trouble?" she asked, choosing her words carefully. Valor Threx's amber eyes flickered with something she couldn't quite identify. "No, not in trouble, but you are under observation." Alina's stomach sank. "Observation?" "Yes," he gestured to the doors. "This room is secure. You may stay here, you may not leave. But you are not a prisoner. You are evaluated." Alina glanced at the walls. They were beautiful, with patterns that shifted slowly like living water. The room was large, luxurious even, but she couldn't shake the feeling of being trapped. "Evaluated for what?" she asked. "Compatibility," Valor Threx replied simply. "For our rituals, for understanding, for interaction." Alina frowned. "Rituals, interaction, I don't understand." Valor Threx knelt slightly, lowering himself to her height, not that it helped much. "In Crack's culture, words have power. You have spoken words that are rare, bold, human words. They cannot be ignored." Alina swallowed hard. She could feel the weight of the moment. Every story she had read about alien encounters, every warning from her instructors, none had prepared her for this. She had always assumed danger would come with weapons or anger or something she could see coming. But this was subtle, almost elegant. "You enjoy this?" she asked cautiously, trying to test the waters. Valor Threx tilted his head. "Enjoy, perhaps. Fascinating, yes. Humans are unpredictable. You joke when there is no safety. You speak without calculation. That is frightening to my people." Alina felt a flicker of relief, but also a surge of curiosity. "Frightening me? I'm just trying to survive." "Survival," he said, "is relative. You survive by thinking differently, by challenging expectations. You are unique." Alina's mind raced. unique, dangerous, evaluated. Her stomach tightened as she realized she was not dealing with a typical alien hierarchy. She was inside a mind puzzle, one designed to test her as much as to test humanity. Valar Threx rose, his towering form once again dominating the room. Do not worry. You will not be harmed. You may rest, you may speak, you may learn, but the door will remain closed for now. Alina nodded slowly, trying to control the tremor in her hands. She knew that any sign of panic could be disastrous. Instead, she forced herself to take deep breaths to study her surroundings. The room was beautiful. Furniture she had no words for, soft, curved, almost alive, lined the walls. Light flowed in strange patterns, reflecting off surfaces in ways she could not predict. And in the center, a small console blinked softly, offering some form of communication. Elena, Valar Threx said suddenly, you are not here as a prisoner. You are here as a participant. You are learning as I am learning from you. Elena blinked. Learning from me? Yes. Humans are strange. You do not follow expected patterns. That is intriguing. For the first time, Elena felt a spark of confidence. Perhaps she was not in danger. Perhaps this strange ritual, this locked room, was an opportunity. She could survive this. She could even turn it to humanity's advantage. And this joke, she said carefully, didn't offend you. Valar Threx's smile returned just slightly. It did not offend me, it confused me, it intrigued me, it challenged me, and that is rare. Alina nodded slowly, letting out a quiet breath she didn't know she had been holding. Rare, interesting, not a death sentence. Valar Threx watched her for a moment longer, then turned to the console in the center of the room. You may speak freely, ask questions, learn our ways. But remember, every word you speak is part of your evaluation. Alina swallowed again. She realized that the game had just begun. This was no ordinary diplomatic mission. She was inside the mind of a warlord in a culture that valued unpredictability above all else. Every choice, every joke, every word could shape the outcome, not just for her but for humanity. She sat on a soft, curving chair and let her hands rest on her knees. She would survive this. She would understand this. And if she was careful, she might even win. The doors remained closed. The chamber was quiet. The alien warlord had not left, but Alina was not afraid, at least not entirely. She was fascinated. And in that fascination she found her first lesson. Sometimes in the vast galaxy, a single human joke could change everything. Alina sat in the soft, curved chair, staring at the walls that shimmered like liquid silver. Her mind was racing. Evaluated, observed, compatible. She had spent her entire career negotiating with humans, diplomats, and even the occasional alien envoy. But nothing had prepared her for this. Valar Threx remained standing, silent, like a shadow stretching across the room. Despite his size, he did not move aggressively. He simply observed, his amber eyes flickering as if they were reading her thoughts. Alina, he said finally, his voice calm, you are uneasy. I suppose I am, she admitted. I'm not sure what to expect. Valar Threx's lips curved into a faint smile. That is normal. You do not understand our rituals, that is expected. You are human. Alina's lips twitched in the beginning of a nervous smile. That's not exactly comforting. It is not meant to be comforting, Valar Threx replied. It is meant to teach. Humans are unusual. You joke when there is no safety. You speak when most would remain silent. That is fascinating. Alina took a deep breath. She tried to steady her racing thoughts. Fascinating, not dangerous. Interesting. Okay, I can work with that. She glanced around the room again. The walls were smooth, yet somehow alive. Soft light moved across the surface, forming patterns that reminded her of water flowing in a stream. The furniture was unlike anything she had ever seen. Soft, curving shapes that seemed to grow from the floor itself. Even the air smelled different, clean and metallic, with a faint trace of something sweet she could not name. I have to admit, she said cautiously, this room, it's beautiful, it's almost alive. Valar Threx's amber eyes narrowed slightly. Yes, that is intentional. Our spaces are designed to reflect our thoughts, to show our understanding of life and balance. You may rest here, you may speak, you may learn, but the doors remain closed for now. Elena nodded, trying to hide her surprise at the calmness of the situation. Not a cage. Not a trap, a study room, an evaluation chamber. You may wonder why I have not left you, Valar Threx continued. Why I do not threaten you or test you with pain. That is because humans are unusual. Your strength is not in force but in thought. You survive not by power but by unpredictability. Elena raised an eyebrow. Unpredictability? You mean humans are scary? Valar Threx inclined his head slightly. In a manner of speaking, yes. Humans do not act as expected. You joke when there is no safety. You speak without calculation. You challenge the rules. That is frightening to many species, but fascinating to me. Elena laughed quietly, shaking her head. Frightening. I feel like I've barely survived a room full of silver walls and alien eyes. And you're calling me frightening? Valar Threx's smile deepened. Do not misunderstand. You are not dangerous in the way you think. You do not strike, you do not kill, you do not conquer. You survive with mind and word. That is rare. Elena leaned back in her chair, letting out a slow breath. She felt a small surge of pride. Rare. Interesting. Not a death sentence. That is something. For a moment the chamber was silent. Then Elena noticed the console in the center of the room. It blinked softly, waiting for interaction. She walked over, touching the smooth surface. A holographic panel appeared, displaying symbols and lights she could not read. "What is this?" she asked. "A communication device," Valar Threx replied. "You may speak freely with others, or with me, but every word you speak is part of your evaluation." Elena hesitated. "Evaluation for what exactly?" "For understanding," Valar Threx said simply. "For trust, for adaptation. You will learn our ways, I will learn yours. In time, perhaps you will understand the full purpose. For now, it is enough that you survive and observe." Elena nodded slowly. She realized that this was not a punishment. It was an opportunity, a chance to understand the cracks in a way few humans ever could. She returned to the chair and sat quietly, letting her mind settle. Valar Threx watched her silently, as if measuring her thoughts. Minutes passed. Then slowly, Elena spoke. "Can I ask why the joke I made earlier caused all this?" Valar Threx considered her question. "In your culture, humor is casual. In ours, words are formal. Your joke was a declaration. It was bold, unexpected, challenging. That is why I brought you here, to observe, to understand, to test." Elena frowned. "Test me? What kind of test?" "A test of mind, of courage, of adaptability," he said. "You will not fight, you will not compete, but you will speak, you will act, you will survive in the only way humans can." Elena let out a small laugh, a nervous one. "So I'm being tested for talking?" "Yes," Valar Threx said simply, "and doing so without fear, that is the human way." Elena shook her head, a small smile forming. "I can't believe I'm being evaluated for a joke." Valar Threx tilted his head. "Believe it, it is how the galaxy learns. Strength is not only in weapons. Strength is in thought, in courage, in defiance. Humans have this strength. You do not need to raise a hand to win." Elena felt a thrill. Defiance without violence, winning without force, that's very human. She realized that the cracks were not testing her for weakness. They were testing her for uniqueness. She took a deep breath. "Then, what do you want from me?" Valar Threx's amber eyes glimmered. "I want to understand. I want to learn. And I want to see how you respond when rules do not bind you. You may stay here, speak, move, think. The doors remain closed until you prove your balance." Elena looked at him in surprise. "Prove my balance?" "Your balance of courage and thought. Your understanding of words and actions. Your ability to survive without harming. That is your test." Elena laughed softly. "This is unlike anything I've ever done, and yet I think I can do it." Valar Threx nodded slowly. Good, that is the first step. Acceptance of the challenge. Humans are remarkable. Your species has survived many threats, and yet your greatest strength is still unknown to most. Your mind, your unpredictability. Alina spent the next hour exploring the room. She touched the walls, the furniture, the glowing consoles. Each object seemed alive, responding subtly to her presence. She realized that Valor Threx had created a space that reflected not just his thoughts, but the essence of his culture. And she understood something else. She was learning more than she realized. The cracks were not monsters. They were disciplined, structured, and bound by rituals. But within those rituals there was curiosity, there was intelligence, and there was a recognition of what humans could offer. When she returned to her chair, Valor Threx was still standing silent. She looked at him. "So, you're not going to eat me or hurt me or lock me away forever?" "No," he said calmly. "You are not a threat in that way. You are a student and perhaps a teacher. Humans have much to show us." Alina smiled faintly. "I guess I'll do my best." "That is all we ask," Valor Threx replied. "Observe, speak, learn, adapt. That is the human way and the way we wish to understand." Alina felt a spark of excitement. This was more than a test. This was an opportunity. And for the first time in a long while she felt truly alive. The doors remained closed, but she was not trapped. She was not a prisoner. She was a participant in something much larger, something that could change the way humans were seen across the galaxy. And as she sat in that quiet, shimmering room, she realized that sometimes survival was not about weapons. Sometimes survival was about words, courage, and the willingness to be understood in a world that expected nothing of you. The game had begun, and Alina Ward, human diplomat, was ready to play. Alina had spent the morning exploring the chamber. Each time she touched the walls, the patterns shifted subtly, like ripples across a silver lake. Every object seemed alive, reacting to her presence in ways she could not predict. She realized this wasn't just a room. It was a reflection of Valor Threx himself, his thoughts and perceptions encoded in light and form. Valor Threx observed her quietly from a distance. He did not speak, but she could feel his attention, precise and unyielding. Despite the initial tension, Alina was beginning to understand something important. The cracks were not testing her physically. They were testing her mind, her courage, her wit, her ability to think in unexpected ways. "Alina," Valor Threx said suddenly, his voice deep and calm, "you move differently from all others we have studied." Alina turned, curious. "Differently?" "Yes," he said. "You do not conform. You do not bow. You do not kneel. You do not follow expectations. You are human." Alina smirked faintly. "That's not very specific. Couldn't that describe a lot of diplomats?" Valor Threx's amber eyes narrowed and a flicker of amusement crossed his face. "Not like you. Most humans hide fear behind rules. Most humans wait for permission. You do not. You speak freely even when the outcome is uncertain. That is rare." Alina thought for a moment. "You mean my joke?" "That is only the beginning," he said. "Your species has survived countless threats without weapons, without dominating others. You thrive through ingenuity, humor, and resilience. That is why humans are dangerous in ways few understand." Alina felt a shiver. Dangerous. Not violent, not cruel, dangerous in thought. That was flattering in a strange way. "I think I understand," she said slowly. "You're not afraid of us because we fight, but because we think differently. We don't play by rules you expect." Valor Threx nodded. "Precisely. That is your greatest strength. Your unpredictability unsettles even the most disciplined cultures. You survive through intellect, wit, and adaptability. That is rare." Alina leaned back, letting her mind wander. If she could survive here simply by using human cleverness, perhaps she could use the same skill to influence Crack's thinking. Diplomacy, communication, subtlety, this could be her battlefield. "And that's what you're evaluating me for?" she asked. Valor Threx's eyes gleamed. "Yes, but not just you. We are learning from all humans. Your species has caused more change than armies. Your words, your ideas, your persistence, they shift outcomes without striking. That is remarkable. Alina smiled faintly. So humans are like walking disturbances. Valor Threx's smile widened slightly. Disturbances that survive. You are unsettling and yet fascinating. That is why you are here, to teach us and to challenge us. For the first time, Alina felt a surge of confidence. She had entered this room thinking she was at risk. Now she realized she was being tested for what humans did best: surviving, thinking, and adapting without harming anyone. She walked over to a console, curious. Soft lights blinked across the surface, and symbols she could not read danced like fireflies. She tentatively touched one of the panels and a holographic map appeared: planets, ships, trade routes. Some of the symbols glowed brighter than others. Valor Threx came closer. That is the interstellar network. You may study it if you wish. You may ask questions. Knowledge is encouraged. Alina's mind raced. Knowledge encouraged, opportunity, yes. These are your trade routes, she asked. Yes, and your species has disrupted them more than once, Valor Threx replied. Without weapons, without armies, just thought, words, strategy. Alina laughed softly. I never thought of humanity as dangerous. We're chaotic, stubborn, but dangerous. Valor Threx's eyes flickered. To those who cannot understand you, yes. You survive in ways others fail to predict. That is a kind of power. She studied the map. Bright lights indicated cracks, fleets moving between systems. Humans had been noted for unexpected alliances, for outsmarting opponents, for making connections that seemed illogical, but effective. Alina realized that the cracks saw this clearly. Humans were a species no one could control. And that's why you brought me here, she asked. To understand, to observe, to see if your species can teach us something we lack. Alina leaned forward. And what do you lack? Valor Threx hesitated, then said quietly, flexibility, humor, creativity that defies pattern. Humans disrupt without destruction. That is foreign to us. Alina smiled. She realized she was learning the cracks as much as they were learning her. So my joke, it was an introduction. Yes, Valor Threx said simply, a bold declaration and a test. You have passed the first part. Now we observe how you act. Alina nodded. Then I'll play along. Over the next few hours, she began to experiment. She walked through the room, touching walls and consoles, speaking aloud. She tried small jokes, testing Valor Threx's reactions. Each time he responded with subtle shifts, his posture, the glow of his eyes, the ripple in the walls. She realized that the chamber was more than a room. It was a dialogue. Her words affected the environment just as much as Valor Threx's presence did. She began to enjoy the challenge, using humor and careful observation to see how the crack's mind worked. You understand quickly, Valor Threx observed. Most beings do not adapt so rapidly. Alina shrugged. Humans survive by observing and reacting. We've had to on Earth. You never know what's coming next. Indeed, Valor Threx said, your survival is remarkable. And your adaptability frightening to some. You are not merely a diplomat, you are a catalyst. Alina paused. Catalyst, she liked that. It meant she could influence events without force. She could win by being human, clever, persistent, unpredictable. She tried another small test. If I understand you correctly, Crack's culture values ritual and structure, and yet you are curious about humans. Valor Threx's eyes flickered. Yes, humans do not fit into our hierarchy. Your unpredictability is enlightening. You challenge expectations. That is rare. And that's why the door stays locked, Alina asked. Yes, observation, learning, understanding. The door is not a barrier. It is a boundary to focus thought, to ensure clarity. Alina smiled faintly. So I'm not trapped. I'm part of your learning experiment. Correct, Valor Threx said. And in this way you may teach us without violence. You may survive without conflict. That is the human way. That is what makes you dangerous in a good sense. Alina leaned back, feeling a thrill. Dangerous, clever, adaptable, these are human strengths. I can use them here. She realized she was no longer nervous. She was intrigued. She was participating in a cultural exchange that would reshape the crack's view of humanity. She spent the rest of the day exploring, testing, speaking. Each word, each movement, each subtle observation was noted, by Valar Threx, by the room, by the shifting patterns of light. She understood now. Survival was not just about avoiding harm. It was about using intelligence, creativity, and humor to influence the observer. At one point, she laughed quietly. "So humans are your most dangerous weapon," she said. Valar Threx tilted his head, a faint glimmer of amusement in his eyes. "Perhaps. You destroy not with force but with thought. That is a weapon few understand." Alina felt a surge of pride. This was more than survival. This was proof that humans could thrive in the galaxy, not through domination but through ingenuity. And she understood something crucial. She was not a captive. She was a participant, a teacher, a catalyst. Every word she spoke, every action she took mattered. And in that she found strength she had never felt before. As the chamber grew quiet, Alina leaned back in her chair and looked at Valar Threx. "I think I can do this. I think I can survive and teach." Valar Threx's amber eyes gleamed. "Good, that is the human way, and perhaps one day the galaxy will learn it too." Alina smiled. She had entered this room thinking she was in danger. Now she realized she was part of something much larger. She was human. She was clever. She was unpredictable. And that was more powerful than any weapon. The door remained closed, but Alina was not trapped. She was free, free to think, free to speak, and free to show the cracks the true strength of humanity. And in that realization, she knew one thing for certain. Sometimes, the most dangerous weapon in the galaxy was not fire or steel. It was a human mind, unafraid to speak the truth. Alina Ward had spent days in the chamber with Valar Threx. Every hour was a lesson in observation, adaptation, and subtle negotiation. She had learned to read the Warlord's slight movements, the shifts in his amber eyes, even the flicker of patterns on the walls. Every action mattered. Every word carried weight. And yet, for all the careful observation, Alina had begun to feel a strange sense of freedom. She was not a prisoner. She was a participant in an experiment that could shape the galaxy's view of humans. She realized that humanity's true strength lay not in weapons or armies, but in the ability to survive, to think, and to adapt when everything seemed impossible. Valar Threx stood silently as Alina spoke, testing ideas, making small jokes, and observing the Warlord's reactions. Slowly she began to see a pattern. The cracks were capable of tremendous structure and discipline, but when faced with unpredictability, they were curious, cautious, and at times playful. "You see, Valar Threx," Alina said one afternoon, "humans survive because we don't always follow the rules. We laugh when the rules are strict. We speak when silence is expected. We make mistakes, and sometimes those mistakes teach us more than success ever could." The Warlord tilted his head. "Yes, that is why humans are frightening and fascinating. Your species creates change without destruction. You challenge tradition without rebellion. You are unpredictable." Alina smiled faintly. "And that unpredictability, it can be used for good." "Yes," Valar Threx replied. "I am beginning to see. Your mind, your humor, your courage, they are dangerous weapons, but weapons that do not destroy. That is rare in the galaxy." Alina leaned back in the curving chair, thinking. The cracks had long relied on ritual and force to maintain order. Humans, she realized, were teaching them something fundamental, that influence, intelligence, and courage could be stronger than armies. Later that day, Valar Threx opened the chamber doors. "You may leave," he said simply, "or you may stay to continue learning together." Alina stepped into the wider council chamber. Crack's delegates paused, looking at her with a mixture of curiosity and suspicion. But Valor simply gestured and they fell silent. "You have endured," the warlord said. "You have shown courage, cleverness, and humor. These are not weaknesses, they are your strength." Alina nodded. "And humans survive because we can see opportunity where others see threat." The other cracks whispered among themselves. Alina realized they had observed her too. They had watched her movements, her words, her confidence, and her subtle defiance of expectation. Valor addressed the council. "Behold the human. She is not strong in arms nor in domination, yet her presence shifts thought, influences decisions, and challenges expectation. She is a teacher, and humanity has lessons for us all." The chamber fell silent. Alina saw heads tilt, eyes widen. The cracks were not used to words having such power. They were used to ritual, dominance, and order. Alina's quiet courage, her jokes, and her careful observation were unsettling and impressive at the same time. She realized then that she had changed something fundamental. Without realizing it, she had begun to reshape cracks' thinking, showing them that humor, observation, and ingenuity were weapons far stronger than fleets or armies. Valor stepped forward. "I propose a new framework for our interactions with humans. We will no longer attempt to dominate them. We will observe, learn, and respect their unpredictability, and we will consider collaboration." Alina smiled quietly. Humans did not conquer by force. They conquered by being human, by being clever, adaptable, and fearless in ways others could not anticipate. Over the next few hours, she explained human diplomacy, humor, and unpredictability to the council. She used examples of Earth history, moments where humans had survived enormous threats, not by weapons but by ingenuity and cooperation. She spoke calmly, confidently, and sometimes with humor. The cracks listened. Some were skeptical, some were amazed. Some, like Valor were quietly fascinated. "You demonstrate resilience," Valor said finally. "And that is a form of power. Humans are dangerous, not because they strike, but because they survive, adapt, and teach. Perhaps this is the path we have lacked." Alina nodded. "And that path does not require violence. It requires courage, creativity, and understanding." A murmur of approval passed through the council chamber. Alina realized that the cracks were beginning to see humans as equals, not as weak creatures to dominate, but as partners in thought and strategy. By the end of the day, the council had adopted a tentative agreement inspired by Alina's insights. Cracks fleets would no longer attempt to interfere unnecessarily with human colonies. Instead, they would observe and engage in dialogue. Valor had effectively reshaped interstellar diplomacy using human ingenuity as his guide. Alina returned to the chamber she had first entered, now a space she felt familiar with, almost comforting. The walls shimmered as if acknowledging her achievement. Valor stood beside her silently, and for a moment there was no tension, only understanding. "You have done more than survive," he said. "You have taught. You have challenged us without force. You have influenced our decisions. That is rare." Alina smiled. "It's what humans do. We survive, we adapt, and sometimes we laugh when it matters most." Valor tilted his head. "Perhaps the galaxy needs more laughter." Alina laughed softly. "And humans have plenty to give." For the first time, she felt the full weight of her success. She had entered this chamber thinking she was a captive, facing a powerful alien warlord. Now she realized that she had changed the galaxy without a single weapon drawn. Humans, she thought, were not meant to conquer by force. They were meant to survive, adapt, and teach. That was their true strength. As she looked at Valor she realized that he had learned as much from her as she had from him. He had seen human courage, humor, and cleverness firsthand, and through her, the cracks had begun to rethink their place in the galaxy. "You have my respect," Valor said. "And perhaps my admiration." Alina nodded. "Thank you, that means a lot." The chamber fell silent again, but this time it was calm, not tense. Elena looked at the shimmering walls and thought about the galaxy beyond. She had survived the first true test of humanity in interstellar politics, and she had won without violence. Later, when she returned to her quarters aboard the Crack's flagship, she drafted a report for Earth. She wrote of observation, diplomacy, and subtle influence. She wrote of how humor, courage, and intelligence could be more powerful than weapons. And in the final lines, she smiled and wrote, "Good news. Humanity has survived, taught, and reshaped a galactic power without firing a single shot. We may be unpredictable, but that is our strength, and the galaxy is finally learning what humans can truly do." For Elena Ward, the doors that had once seemed like a trap were now a symbol of triumph. She had entered thinking she would have to fight or escape. Instead, she had used her mind, her courage, and her humanity to change an empire. And in that realization, she understood something profound. Sometimes the most dangerous force in the galaxy is not a fleet of ships, not a weapon of destruction, but a human being unafraid to think, speak, and act with courage and cleverness. The galaxy had learned something new that day, and humanity had won. Elena leaned back, feeling a sense of satisfaction she had never known. The doors were open now, but the chamber, like the galaxy itself, felt different. Because in every corner, every shadow, every shimmer of light, she had left a mark, and that mark was unmistakably human. I joked, "You'd make a cute wife." The alien warlord just smiled and locked the door.